There he is. Look at this guy, man. Look, hey, I gotta admit, like I feel like my beard is pretty good. I feel like every single day this guy's beard gets even better. I asked his wife the other day on Facebook if she approved of the beard, and I did not get a response. So I'm
The
taking that as a
response
negative
is,
sign.
yeah, the response is this is out of control. The wife is not impressed, but you look sharp, my friend. How the heck are you?
Dude, I'm doing pretty good. I'm joined by my friends at Virginia back here. Got a little Vandy behind me on the other side. Aaron, it's hard to imagine, but we would only be a couple of weeks away from conference tournaments if the college baseball season was still going on. It's crazy to think it's been that long.
It's nuts, isn't it? I mean, the season's flown by, Kendall. It seems like just yesterday we were in week four. It's no, not to be flippant about it because this stinks. I mean, we're sitting here in mid-May, and it's been 2 months since we've had baseball, and it just stinks. We're getting by. Everyone's getting by.
Yeah.
We're all in the same boat. We're doing the best we can, but it stinks. I'm ready for baseball, man. I hate this.
Yeah, it's certainly interesting, and we'll talk real quick about the draft just because we're getting some questions here in the queue. If you have some questions, let us know. We will answer them as soon as possible. But Aaron had a great column a couple of days ago about the MLB draft and the fact that this decision to only go 5 rounds and give $20,000 to undrafted players at the end of the day can end up turning some kids off on actually pursuing baseball as a career and as a hobby. And Aaron, just kind of talk about that column. That was a really good piece.
Yeah, and I don't want to overstate it.
Yeah.
Certainly we all have to recognize that this is a time of crisis and that everything is unusual. But to me, the broader point I was trying to make, Kendall, was that I'm concerned about the long-term goals that Major League Baseball is pursuing here. It's not just about the short-term, situation, which is okay, trying to save some money. Let's cut the draft down. And
Hmm.
I mean, the amount of money that we're saving here, the Major League clubs are saving by going to a 5 round draft is really pretty negligible. If you're the average major league team is worth, $1.5 billion, and we're talking about saving $1 million by cutting the draft down to 5 rounds, that doesn't really move the needle, Kendall. This is about Major League Baseball taking advantage of a crisis in order to further its larger goals, which
Hmm.
are to reduce the amount of rounds, going forward, and also to reduce the amount of affiliates that they have. And
Yeah.
um, I mean, there's I guess some reasons for that. I mean, maybe they recognize that the labor strife that lies ahead with minor league baseball is going to be a problem. You can't afford to pay all your minor leaguers less than minimum wage forever because eventually you're going to lose one of these lawsuits and you're not going to be able to lobby
Yeah.
Congress successfully to give you an exemption from basic minimum wage laws. I mean, you know, I wrote this in my column, but players in short season ball and A ball last year. Jake Mangum, you finished up your great career at
Hmm.
Mississippi State. You go to the New York Penn League, you're making $290 a week last year. And they got a big pay raise for this year. They're supposed to make $400 a week. That equals $4,800 a year
Yeah.
over the course of 3 months. They're not getting paid in spring training. They're not getting
Hmm.
paid in fall instructional league. $4,800 a year to play minor league baseball. And so maybe Major League Baseball is thinking we want to reduce the amount of affiliates so that we can actually give the minor leaguers we do have a living wage. That would be a good thing. But I'm afraid, in the meantime, this is just a short sighted move here. I don't think it's a good idea to cut the amount of affiliates because you're reducing the amount of opportunities for players, and
Yeah.
by a large amount. I mean, we're talking about 40 something fewer affiliates times what, 25, 30 men rosters apiece. That's a lot less jobs, than we had before. And I think that sends the wrong message.
Yeah. Not only jobs on the field, but think of all the jobs lost off the field if this ends up happening. So, certainly a storyline to watch. We had a user, I'm trying to remember who it was now. I think it was an OU fan, asked if we do not have college football this fall, will we have college baseball? Personally, I don't think so. But there's two trains of thought here, Aaron. On one hand, if you don't have college football, you kind of feel like you're not going to have anything else. But on the other, if you look into the spring as things warm up and whatnot, maybe if you're athletic director and athletic department, you're looking at a way to kind of salvage something if you don't play football. But I think if you look at football, there is a lot of flexibility here. They don't have to start in September. I mean, football theoretically, since you have spring football, you could start in January. and in football season in March if we really wanted to. So, uh, it certainly seems like football will be played, but as we've all kind of learned over the last couple of months, kind of expect the unexpected to kind of steal a line from Augie Garrido. So, the short answer for me, and we'll get Aaron's take too, is if football is not played, I think I would lean towards nothing being played. But I could see the argument for playing something.
It's a long way to go
Yeah.
on that one. We just don't know. It's all speculation. We don't know which way the virus is going to go.
Hmm.
Um, and we'll cross that bridge when we get there. I mean, we don't know if there's going to be any summer ball. I know these summer leagues all want to play. A lot of them do. A lot of them are talking about a July 1st start date. We don't even know that. We're a month and a half out. We don't know.
Hmm.
And so as far as what's going to happen in the fall and what's going to happen next spring, I'm going to take it one day at a time on that. But all I know is going back to the draft thing, Kendall, because I think it's a big deal. I mean, I just think that um, to cut the draft to 5 rounds and force everybody who's not drafted that you got to either take 20 grand to sign or else you got to go back to school and lose some of your leverage, not all of
Yeah.
your leverage, but some of it. It's a big deal. And we're talking about 400 guys last year got drafted in the 6th round or later and got 6-figure bonuses. 400 guys who got 6-figure bonuses are going to have to take 20 grand or
Hmm.
else go back to school. And so, we that equates to about 18 or 19 rounds worth of guys that major league teams view as 6-figure caliber guys. So
Yeah.
it's not like there aren't players after the top 5 rounds. There's a lot of good players after the top 5 rounds. And what's going to happen to these guys? I mean, a lot of them are going to come back to school. I think most of them are. I mean, talking to agents, and I remember talking to a guy who, his agent, his kid is kind of on the borderline of top
Yeah.
5 rounds. He's maybe more of a 6 to 10 guy. And I said, if he's not drafted in those top 5 rounds, I mean, is there any chance that he go ahead and signs for
Yeah.
20 grand? And the guy's like, no way. I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, if you're a 6th round pick and you're looking at getting $250,000, which you're going to need to carry you through the minors for a few years, making $500 a week, then you're not going to take 20 grand. You're going to go back to school. And then what happens next year when you've got a bigger draft? You've got, only 20 rounds, but it's condensed with a lot of different players from, it's going to be a mess. It's really going to be a mess.
Aaron, the guys I feel for the most are the juniors who would be in that 6 to kind of 10 round range,
Yeah.
because they're going to come back for another year more than likely, and they're going to be in an ultra loaded draft with the incoming freshman class or the prep guys that they're seniors in the high schools, the returning junior class, and then the sophomores that are getting their year back that will be draft eligible next year. So those guys, maybe if they were slotted in kind of that 7 to 10 round range, suddenly they've got 3 draft classes they're fighting against to kind of sit in that same slot going into next year.
Exactly, and that's going to be a problem. It's going to be a log jam for all those guys. In addition to the problem it's causing for college baseball, which that's not Major League Baseball's business. They don't
Yeah.
care about that, and they shouldn't care. It's not that's not their purview. But they should care about what they're doing to the players, because I don't think it's right. At the very least, go 10 rounds,
Yeah.
and allow non-drafted guys to sign for more than 20 grand. You can still save a little bit of money,
Hmm.
but I mean, again, the amount of money they're saving is not even worth doing what they're doing. I just think
Yeah.
they're being bad actors for the sake
20,
of
20 grand
imposing
is
their
is a
will.
joke.
It's a joke. I mean,
Diana
again,
Adams, Diana Adams here and asked a very good question. If there's no fall baseball, will that have an impact on the spring season? I think it has to.
yeah, of
I mean,
course.
if you think about the CS systems, you have San Diego State, Fullerton, Long Beach State, Sac State, Fresno State. I'm sure I'm missing somebody somewhere, but anyways, that's a lot of teams, and so
Well, Fullerton, Irvine. I mean, there's, well, not Irvine, I guess.
Irvine's a
Well,
Cal school, but
but
I'm
is
trying to
it?
remember if
But
Cal Poly is UC or State. I can't remember, but
did
still, you're
they
talking San Jose State. I mean, you're talking
Long Beach?
at minimum 7 to 8
Yeah,
schools. And somebody made a good point on Twitter a minute ago. Jay Inslee of Washington, the governor of Washington, the governor of Oregon. They've kind of been in lockstep with Gavin Newsom on some of the things they've done in the respective states, and you kind of wonder, do they, put that kind of broad brush on Oregon and Oregon State, and in the state of Washington, do they do that with Gonzaga, UW, and Wazoo? So I absolutely think it'll affect things, because if you have, let's say you have 15 schools, and some of those schools are Pac-12, some of those schools are Big West, two pretty prominent leagues in our sport. I mean, what are you going to ask them to start the season in mid-February when they didn't even play fall ball?
Yeah.
I don't know what you do. I mean, I don't know if this kind of kickstarts a discussion of moving the season back a little bit or what. It's too early to say, but I absolutely think it has an effect.
Yeah, I agree. And I think you're right too that we're going to see that spread. I mean, California has typically been kind of at the forefront of
Yeah.
this, and other states follow suit. And you know, we just, again, going back to what we know, what we don't know. What we don't know is what's going to happen with this virus. I mean, I think
Hmm.
certainly there's risks that as we try to reopen, I think Dr. Fauci warned today that don't reopen too early because things
Yeah.
could get worse. And so, if that happens, all bets are off. But certainly, I want fall baseball. Everyone does.
Yeah.
In our little bubble, we all want to allow these guys to get on the field. But worst comes to worst, I think if there is no fall baseball, you still just go forward and make do the best you can next spring. If
Yeah.
things have cleared up enough by the spring to play, even if you don't have a chance to play in the fall, you just do what you can. I mean, it's unprecedented. You do what you can, and maybe you get less practice
Yeah.
time in beforehand, but you just go for it.
Yeah, I've heard of a couple of northern leagues talking about, playing 48 games or even potentially playing conference only games to kind of trim some costs off their budget. So I think there are a lot of different, as the user just said here, I think there are a lot of different variables involved here, and it's kind of a fluid situation. There's no absolutes here. Anybody have any
Yeah,
other questions? What's up, Justin? Our resident NC State fans in the house. I was just
this
talking to
is.
Elliot Avent the other day. He was dodging copperheads in his backyard again. Thankfully, he did not take one into a hospital.
I don't know what it is with Elliot and copperheads.
He said he was
Poor
dodging
guy.
them. Said he's wearing tall boots and still dodging them.
Kendall, other news right now. I mean, in our world, the draft, of course, has kind of been the big thing
Yeah.
going on right now. But what are you hearing? What's the latest thing that you're hearing about the transfer vote? I mean, I know that's something that
Okay.
a lot of people are waiting on.
It's really interesting. As I've kind of learned with the D1 Council, it's kind of like this whole situation. You never know what to expect, but I feel like with the board of directors coming out a couple weeks ago and saying they did not recommend passing that right now, I think I'd be very, very surprised if they passed it. So I think we're pretty much stuck where we were. You're going to have to get waivers. The one thing I will say about this, Aaron, is I do wonder, if the NCAA officially says, "Hey, it's not open transfers," but maybe unofficially says, "Hey, kind of behind closed doors, if you put in a waiver, we'll approve it." So even if they voted down, let's wait and see what happens with that. Because you could certainly see them kind of go, "Hey, this is going to pass in January." Like we all know that. Like football, basketball coaches are already kind of resigned to the fact it's going to pass. So let's see if the NCAA decides just to kind of behind closed doors go, "Hey, put your name in the waiver system, and we'll let you move on."
Yeah, I think that's probably a pretty likely solution, I guess. Makes a lot of sense to me. We had a question here about from Chase Haney. Do you think the draft decision benefits senior signs? I don't know if that's the Chase Haney from Florida State.
It looks like it
Uh,
is.
yeah,
How about
but
that?
how about
NOEL.
that?
Go ahead. I was gonna.
No,
Good.
yeah, I think to answer your question, Chase, it's a good question, because typically, of course, seniors, a lot of them get picked in those 6 to 10 round range, and they take less money than the juniors would in that same range, but at least you're getting picked. And I mean, really, a lot of those guys are making less than 20 grand bonuses anyway, or 20 grand or less. I mean, there's guys in the top 10 rounds, seniors that go for 10 grand. I think you'll see a lot of seniors still go out and sign for $20,000 or less, and you have their opportunities. So I don't think a lot of things will really change for the seniors. Those guys, they want to get their pro career started. I mean, for them, a lot of them, I think there's incentive to go ahead and take $20,000 or whatever you can get, because you aren't going to get a lot more than that anyway in a normal year. Maybe not any more than that at all. So, yeah, I think there'll be opportunities for seniors.
Hey, one thing I was going to bring up, I was talking to a top assistant at a large, impressive mid-major school today, and one thing they kind of brought up with me was they did not like the idea of actually increasing the roster cap. They kind of felt like What was it earlier today? Scott Dubrel at Jacksonville's best player, transferred to Mississippi State as a graduate transfer. The point this coach made is like, number one, the roster cap being lifted. His feeling was it really benefits the Power Five schools. And why are we increasing the roster cap? His point was, why are we increasing the roster cap when all they're doing is bringing in grad transfers? And so it was a kind of a illuminating discussion. We
Yeah.
talked for about 30 minutes about this.
Yeah, I'm wondering if I spoke with the same coach
You
today,
probably did.
but because that's a valid point.
Yeah.
If you're a Power Five school and you're worried about your roster crunch, and then you're going out and bringing in an impact grad
Yeah.
transfer, it's not a great look.
No.
That said, I still feel like we need to do something about the roster cap. And
Mm-hmm.
yes, I understand that it benefits the Power Fives more than the mid majors, but some of the good mid majors still have unexpected draft consequences to deal with. They still have juniors coming back that they weren't expecting. They still have maybe a high profile freshman or two that they thought they would lose to the draft who's going to show up instead. So it's not just the Power Fives, but even if it were just the Power Fives, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it's not their fault that there was that there was
Yeah.
a crisis, and that Major League Baseball shorted his draft to 5 rounds. I mean, if you're at a school where you're going to have 8 to 10 guys drafted and sign, and you know who they are, even like Dan McDonald said, I think I saw recently. I've been doing this a long time. I know who's going to sign and who's not going to sign for the most part. Now and then there's a surprise, but like you pretty much know, okay, these 8 guys are going to sign. We better replace them. It's not
Mm-hmm.
their fault that a lot of those guys are coming back. And so it's not the players' faults either. I mean, we need to make
Well,
room for the players.
yeah, and it's like if you're Chris Lemonis and that kid calls you and he hit 400 and 380 at a pretty solid program, a program that is consistently in the regionals. I mean, what are you going to say? No, you're going to find a way to get him in your program.
Yeah, and that's true, but again, it will add to the roster crunch. I don't know how much of an epidemic it is, Kendall, that these graduate seniors are going to these Power Five schools right now and exacerbating the roster crunch. I don't know. We have to look at the overall numbers, but I mean, I haven't heard too much of a groundswell of that happening. Have you?
Not really, not just yet. One thing I was going to bring up, and by the way, as I said a minute ago, if you have a few more questions, we'll stay on for about 6, 7 more minutes here. But if you have a few more questions, get them in. We'll stick around till 9 Eastern. One of the things that's been talked about a lot here recently, Aaron, whether it's been mid-major coach, Power Five coach, people in influential positions in our sport, is this idea of has this pandemic kind of kickstarted a move towards potentially a division split. I think one of our readers, and I'm trying to remember his name, it might have been Walter Summers, I think, sent us an article,
Yeah.
a really interesting article the other day, just about is what's happening. And we're not saying like we're glad this is happening, but is what's happening actually like a good thing for college sports to kind of reprioritize, hey, should Monmouth be chasing LSU in baseball and things like that? So, a lot of coaches have been talking about that. They feel like this is kind of pushing more toward an eventual division split. Do you kind of see it that way? I mean, I do a little bit, but it's kind of one of those things like until I see it, I don't really believe it.
This is something you've talked about and that you've been in favor of for
Yeah,
a long time now. I think you're a proponent of having two
yeah,
kind of divisions
absolutely.
in Division One, and doesn't mean those teams can't still play against each other. But
Yeah,
your point has always been, why should the have-nots hold back the haves? The teams that have resources and want to commit them to baseball, and the teams that draw really well and have invested $60 million in their stadiums. And why
hmm
should we let the teams that aren't fully funded hold those teams back? And maybe there's something to be said for kind of a reset during this crisis. I mean, there's a lot of programs that are going to be cut, and I've talked about how I think that's obviously a
yeah,
bad thing,
and it
because we're
sucks.
talking
Yeah,
about it sucks, and it's at the bottom line level, it's just fewer opportunities for players, and that stinks. But it's also, a lot of those programs um, have history and tradition, and have coaches that really care and
yeah,
do a great job with talent development at those smaller schools, even if they're not fully funded. And so, you know, I think it would be a real shame if a lot of programs get cut, but
Yeah.
at the same time, it is certainly a chance for us to kind of take a step back and decide what direction the sport needs to go long term.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was talking to Craig Kylis, executive director of the ABCA today, and he said the number of programs that are still not 11.7 is still north of 40%. So,
Yep.
in Division One, to me, at minimum, you should be 11.7.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think that would be a good thing for the sport. And because, then if the programs that want to spend more on scholarships, if they decide, hey, let's go 13, 14, 15 scholarships for baseball, and maybe if you have a baseline level where everybody has 11.7, maybe it gives you a chance to raise the threshold. But right now, when you've got almost half the
Yeah.
schools that aren't fully funded, it just makes it hard to do that.
Yeah, Craig and Ketchley, the star Dallas Baptist reliever here has a pretty good comment. It says the level of competition within the program themselves and the rest of the country will push the game to a level that's never been seen before. 100% agree. I think when you look at the schedules out there right now, I think these midweek schedules in particular will get a lot more competitive. Schools like Texas and Texas A&M will be playing programs like Sam Houston, U of H and stuff more often as opposed to just once a year. I think the level of play would be better. I think you would have, more intense competition. I will warn coaches. I've talked to a lot of coaches that are for it, but it makes their jobs harder, and it makes their job security less. So it's kind of for coaches. It's kind of be careful what you wish for a little bit.
Kendall, I guess the other thing we should probably address is the regionalization of college athletics in general
Yeah,
and college baseball in particular. I mean, what's your sense? Because I know you've had some discussions about this, about
yeah.
what college baseball might wind up looking like from a scheduling standpoint next year.
Yeah, so the Atlantic 10, I wrote about this a while back, but it's been a few weeks. But the Atlantic 10, the Colonial, and I'm trying to remember the Big East. Those three leagues are talking about doing kind of a regional alliance to where they would essentially create pods to where like College of Charleston would play, Virginia Commonwealth, and the teams from those other two conferences that are in its area, and you would have that same situation in the Mid Atlantic. You'd have that same situation in the Northeast. They're not the only ones. I've heard murmurs out there of the Conference USA and the Sun Belt doing a similar arrangement. I talked to an athletic director in Conference USA a couple weeks ago that said that he had heard about it. There were no concrete kind of discussions about it, but he said, "Hey, and with all this going on, it would not surprise me." And he has heard about it. So those are the first two things. I think the Big 12 has had calls about potentially doing some more regionalization. I would think from the Big 12's perspective, it's probably more midweek game oriented.
Yeah.
I've heard from a couple of Northern coaches, specifically in the Big 10, that their games can get trimmed. They're going to have to find games they can drive to. So these Big 10 programs who go down to Florida, I would be very surprised at this point, unless something changes very quickly. If they head down to Florida for a month to start the season, I think what you're going to see is, Michigan going to Vanderbilt. You're going to see Ohio State going to UK. You're going to see a lot of things from a scheduling standpoint shuffled around. So I think the regionalization aspect, I think we're just getting started. I think it's going to heat up because at the end of the day, if the decision is either play people near you or you're not playing at all, you're going to play people near you. So I think that's what's going to happen.
But if the season starts in mid-February and you're at Monmouth, if you're at
Yeah,
Boston
I
College,
don't know what you do.
Northeastern,
Don't
you
play
can't go,
non-conference games, I guess. I mean, that's
I
what
guess.
one Northern Conference has talked about is not playing non-conference games. And so, if you're at that point, you have issues. I mean, if you're the NCAA, I mean, how do you value the RPI if Ole Miss and Mississippi State are playing non-conference and all the Big Ten played or conference games? Like, I don't know what you do because, as we both well know, the Big Ten teams, since the RPI was kind of redone, which it was redone for a good reason. Those teams, if they're playing on the road the first month of the season, to me, they deserve to get a little bit of boost in the RPI.
Yes.
If you're not playing on the road for the first month, like, where do you get your RPI points from? So this has wide-ranging ramifications on pretty much every aspect of the sport.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if going hand in hand with this, if the proposal to push the season back gets any traction now. I know that's something to keep an eye on potentially going forward, but
No,
a
absolutely.
lot of moving parts, Kendall. This is a bizarre time in our world. It's a
Hmm.
bizarre time, certainly in college sports, and in college baseball, we'll take it one day at a time. Like I said before, the draft is the next item up. The transfer rule vote, certainly a big thing to
Yeah,
keep an eye on.
I want to say May 20th or May 24th, one of the two. But do not expect that to pass. One thing I was going to pass on as well, the MAC announced today that it will not have its conference tournament for, I think it was like 7 sports, including baseball, for the next 4 years. So they're just trying to
Really,
trim some costs. So again, it kind of I kind of feel like when one thing happens with one conference, it kind of permeates to other leagues. I would probably look for that to happen to some other conferences.
that's interesting. That's interesting too. And I mean, there's I think a strong argument that we shouldn't have conference tournaments for those one bid
Yeah,
leagues anyway.
Eric
Let your
Sorensen will be very happy.
let your best team, let your best team get your automatic bid. But, of course, there's a other argument in favor of conference tournaments because it gives teams in the lower half of the standing some hope. If you can
Yeah.
just sneak into that conference tournament, get hot for one weekend, it kind of keeps you engaged all year long. But anyway, if cost realities interfere, then so be it, I
Yeah,
say.
we're gonna either way. College baseball programs, without a doubt, are gonna have to find ways to cut costs this year. I mean,
Nope,
there's
no
no ands
question.
or buts about it. They're gonna have to cut costs, and these coaches, I think, from the ones I've talked to, are very much prepared to do whatever they need to do.
Well, this has been a fun discussion, Kendall. Thanks to everybody for watching. I've enjoyed this, and we should do this more often. This is our first
It was
attempt at this.
flawless. It was
We're,
flawless.
we're pros. We're pros.
All right, guys. Everybody have a good one. We'll do this soon again. Thanks.